Good evening, everyone. Good evening, viewers, local and abroad. Good evening to everybody joining us on the internet, social media. We're trying a broader program tonight. We're broadcasting from one of the pages, so we're trying to keep track of what's going on. But so far, we seem to have a handle on it. The full panel is here, minus Senator Nakhid and Dr. Teware, both of whom are on their way. So let me introduce our guests and give them a minute to say their good evenings as I move through the panel. I'll start with, to my right, Ramona Ramdial, former MP and Minister, Government Minister. Good evening, Ms. Ramdial.
Hi. Good night to everyone. Good night, Trinidad and Tobago.
And as we continue with ladies first, Dano Suku, President of the Agricultural Society. Good night. Welcome back, Dano.
Good night, everyone, and thank you, Phillip, for including us in this discussion.
And in order of seniority, actually, I wouldn't be able to know what that is, but the first person I called and he said yes right away, as always, is former Mayor Youseph, Ghassan Youseph. Good evening, Gus.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. And thank you for inviting me.
Good evening.
Professor Emeritus Patrick Watson. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, and good evening to all the panelists, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
And of course, no stranger, Seereeram, former Managing Director of Citicorp Group. That's the correct bank, yes, Vade?
Yes. That's a long time ago.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, panelists.
Good evening.
Glad to be here, Phillip.
So let's just bite down on it one time. The name of the show is Deconstructing the Budget. Some things were announced today that people are asking questions about, not the least of them being the $41 billion that's touted as the total is not adding up. There seems to be some numbers missing. I see Dr. Bhoe Teware is joining us. Good evening, Doctor. I don't know if Bhoe is hearing as yet. While he's signing in, we will give him that opportunity to say his good evenings. Professor Watson, before we came on air, I had asked you a question. So I'm going to ask you the question again for those who want to know the answer. The oil and the gas is ours, but they say it costs us a subsidy. And the subsidy we've spent to ourselves, which seems like left pocket or right pocket accounting to me, is $29 billion in the last 16 years. Explain to the viewers that subsidy and how it is derived or what it represents.
Well, I'm not too sure what you mean by it's ours or not. The fact is there is a subsidy, and the subsidy has at times been extremely large. The fact is the government fixes the price at the pump. But there is a price that the gasoline costs, and it is normally lower. The price we pay is normally lower than what the true price is, and that is a subsidy. That's what a subsidy normally is. That's how a subsidy is in everyday life. We also have subsidies on our light bills and so on as well. So whether it's ours or not, it's not an important matter. The fact is you have to pay for it. And what you pay is not the true price. So the difference is a subsidy. There were points in time recently, in particular for the premium, where we may have actually been paying higher than the international price, because as the price falls, the price should be adjusted downwards. Now, if you live in a country like England or even in the Caribbean and Jamaica, I am not sure about the other countries because I've seen it operate in Jamaica. You go from one gas station to the next, you could pay different prices. In fact, I used to go to one that I know when I was driving in Jamaica, I go to one that I know is cheaper than the others because they have no subsidy and the price is adjusted according to the changes in the price from day to. I'm talking from day to day. The price could change, and similarly in England, when you're driving around, you'll see the prices are different at the pump because they don't have a subsidy, but we do. What has happened from today is that the government is no longer fixing the price at the pump. I'm not too sure exactly when this will kick in. So you are going to go from one. one gas station to the next, and they will be charging you at different prices. So you will not
Professor,
know what it
is. For just
Yes.
1 second to that point, I just want to give Senator David Nakhid a chance to say his good evenings because they're a couple of minutes late. Good evening, Senator Nakhid.
Good evening, to all, and thank you for the invitation to be on this distinguished panel.
Indeed.
Good
Dr.
evening.
Bhoe, Teware, are you hearing us now?
Yeah, I'm hearing
Yeah, I'm hearing you perfectly, yes.
Excellent. We were
Yeah,
just touching on the.
good evening, everybody. Glad to be with
Yes,
you.
Good
good
evening.
evening.
Good
Good
evening.
Thanks
evening.
for
Good
inviting
evening.
me.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr.
Right.
Teware.
So, Professor, just to beat this for the last couple of minutes, I just want to ask you one question. If the supplier of gas to all the gas stations is basically National Petroleum Marketing Company,
Yes.
what are people playing with then? Their profit margin?
No, the National Petroleum is not affected. What you are playing with is the taxpayers' contribution to you driving your car. In fact, let me put my position clear on this. For years, I've been asking for a removal of the subsidy because it is a very inefficient thing to have going. And the people who benefit the most are the people who use gas the most. And the people who use gas the most are generally the people who could own vehicles and big businessmen who drive big trucks and things like that. Up to now, the diesel, by the way, still has a fairly reasonable subsidy on it, and that is going to go as well. I'm not sure when it's going to kick in. I can't remember exactly what the minister said, but all of these things are going to go. And from now on, you'll be paying the price, and nobody is going to be supporting you in what you spend on the gasoline. Now, at the moment, and the minister is right, and he's very clever about it. The price is so low now; it's relatively low that you are actually probably paying more than the world price at the pump, given what we now pay. But it seems as though by his own, and in fact, the price he gave for the budget is higher, than what is the actual price at this point in time. So I suspect that he's anticipating that the price will rise. When that starts to happen, the price at the pump will also rise. So from now on, you'll be paying more at the pump if the price rises. As my own suspicion is that it is going to happen as people come out of the COVID more and more. It's not going to rush. It's not going to be a big rush, but you're going to be getting rising prices at the pump. Not necessarily tomorrow, but over time, that is what you're going to get. You are no longer going to be seeing the same fixed price at the pumps anymore.
So we have to know the price of gas, where we're going to shop and to choose there.
That's right, as happens in many other countries. In fact, this happens in the United States of America. This happens in England. This happens in Jamaica. This is what we have. That's what the reality is. And I am quite sure I never paid attention in Barbados, where I drive from time to time as well. But I'm quite sure it happens there as well. Okay?
Okay, so thank you for clearing that up a little bit. And so now that we have the full panel, I guess we will start with the ladies first and ask everybody to give us in a couple minutes their take on the actual budget that was read today. I guess I'll start again with former MP and former Minister Ramona Ramdial. Ramona, you want to give us your take on what we heard today?
Sure, definitely, Philip. First of all, let me thank you for having me on this panel. Let me say first and foremost that I thought that the budget was really a little bit uninspiring in terms of what I've been hearing over the past 10 years as a sitting MP in the Parliament. A lot of what Col Mimbert spoke about it has been rehashed by him. A lot of repetition with respect to initiatives in the energy sector, initiatives with respect to the environment, initiatives with respect to transport and tourism. Let me get down to it. I understand, and his statement was that Tobago allocation for fiscal 2021 is 2.13 billion. Let me at the onset say that from my experience, these allocations is not the reality. This instance, with respect to Tobago, they may end up getting more than the 2.13 billion, and we have seen this happen in previous years. Because then you have the PPP projects, then you have other initiatives undertaken under developmental projects, and those figures will be included in the budget estimates that would have been made public by this evening. So anybody can log on to the Parliament website and get these budget estimates online. So what I'm saying is that whilst we see 2.13 billion for Tobago, the actual allocation will be more. Secondly, let me say that I was not very impressed by the initiatives for tourism. As you know, in a post-COVID world, and what is happening right now, it will take time for tourism to recover, and therefore there needs to be a strategic plan in dealing with tourism, especially for Tobago. Now, I heard Tom speak about, talk about the allocations for the Tobago hoteliers, the 50 million that they promised 6 months ago. And if you ask hoteliers in Tobago, they would tell you that they have not received their allocations from that first promise of the 50 million. So we don't know how long it's going to take and what is really lacking from this budget presentation, which we hope will be given during the budget debate on the floor, and then after that during Standing Finance Committee, the details of when, how much, how fast, why. So these are the questions that would need to be asked. Let me also say that I always find it very insulting to the workers within the tourism sector and to the stakeholders of the tourism sector in Trinidad when every budget they have not been mentioned. If you notice, what has been happening is that we talk about the Tourism Trust in Tobago, which is all well and good. I'm in full support of that. But there is never any sort of trust being given to the Trinidad stakeholders. So what is happening to the initiatives that we have here in Trinidad? What is happening to those initiatives? What are the allocations for the projects here in Trinidad? I understand that the Minister of Tourism spoke about the rehabilitation of our local tourism sites. And I give reference to Temple in the Sea and that Western Coast, upgrading of the Western Coast to attract tourists and all of that. But that is not a reality right now. But as I always say, they always seem to leave out the Trinidad tourism stakeholders and just focus on Tobago. To that, Phillip.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a second. I think that maybe because we just relegate Tobago to tourism, but I wanted to get everybody else's, you know, in a short caption, bullet points, what you got from it. But if you still have more to add, just give us that, and I want to get everybody else's take.
Yeah, definitely. I want to say also that the health sector, there wasn't much talk on the health sector, and as you know, there is a need for urgent health sector reform with respect to not the COVID, not the parallel system that they have for COVID right now, but really the general core systems of our health sector and the role of the RHAs, the legislation that govern the RHAs, that needs to be seriously amended. I didn't hear much about national security, but again, as I said, probably on the floor of the debate, we will hear of that.
Senator Nakhid is the only practicing parliamentarian right now. I don't know if you want to give a look into what your take was on this budget so far.
Well, the problem with the budget is never in the reading of the budget, but always in the implementation of the budget. I mean, it's all anybody, and I try to look at this budget really with an objective view of things. I purposely did not go to the Parliament. I said I would stay home and really try and look at the reading of the budget with forceful eyes. And I don't want to sound elitist when I say that, you know, but I wanted to look at it with forceful eyes. And there was nothing holistic about it, even though it's a very extensive wish list. You know, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, which is easy. It's always, that's why I said that the budget reading is always easier than the actual implementation. And when I look at something, even for example, sports, which people associate me with, I look at this. They spoke about it's basically copy paste from the extensive document of the recovery committee, that roadmap recovery committee document, which did not even include. You just mentioned everyone associates tourism with Tobago. You have sports tourism, and you did not even include the Dwight York Stadium, although it was mentioned that it's going to be upgraded. You know, it's all about what and never about how. And that is what is disconcerting to me. How does this budget help low-income earners put money in their pockets? You tell us that you're gonna have some relief for 250,000 people, and tell us that 750 million you are basically not gonna have for you. Well, that was never to have for you in the first place. They make it sound like they're doing the low-income earners a favor. And in reality, a budget like this only emphasizes the fact that this government, or the government of the day, has no compass of where they are or where they are positioned to take this country forward. Because if you're going to take, pardon? So if you're gonna basically, yeah, where to go? If you're basically gonna put some money back in the hands of low-income earners, institute a property tax, institute higher subsidies on things that will affect them directly, then basically you have done nothing for them except try to deceive. And I think most people on the panel will agree that that is what will happen. That instead of the big announcement by Imbert, that and to much clapping by his supporters there in Parliament, it was easily seen through. All smoke and mirrors. And go on.
No, I want to agree with you, because you would have expected that a post-COVID-19, I mean, he started off the budget reading by saying how poised the country was to success and how well we were about to do. And I don't know how I missed that memo, because the country went through 4 years of recession prior to COVID-19 in March. So I don't know where all those fantastic numbers came from. And I'm looking for that information.
I think by statistics there was 1 year with a 0.1% growth, which is so minimal. And I think this government fails to let us know how effectively they're gonna help the people that should be helped in this budget. Abysmal failure.
Let me pass to Dr. Teware. Dr. Bhoe Teware, do you think that this budget had anything in it for a country looking for direction as to a way forward from all of this recession and now this damaging COVID-19 pandemic and what it did to our economy? Did you think that this budget had anything in it that gave the people?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I may be wrong, and it's just, but I thought that this budget was a departure from the 5 other that have been presented by the Minister of Finance. And I think it was a departure because, one, the crisis created by COVID and the fact that we had to lock down the economy, and we're facing a situation now where we are losing jobs, we are losing businesses, we are continuing with economic decline, and the economy is shrinking. And I think it was one of the reasons for the change by the Minister of Finance is also because he's been talking to the business community, and the business community has been more active in its demand about what is required to build confidence, to cause a recovery, and to, in fact, people back their jobs that are being lost and to save some of the businesses. And I think he also paid attention to the roadmap recovery report, the roadmap committee's report, because they focused on things like how do you build up aggregate demand, how do you keep the economy going, and the focus in there was also recovery, jobs, and growth. So in that sense, I think given these two influences, the business community and the COVID, and the roadmap committee, and given the reality of COVID's change with economies collapsing in the world everywhere, we ourselves having an economy that is collapsing before us, I think he took a different track to kind of focus on those things that would help to build confidence, that would stimulate the economy, and that could maybe cause a recovery and create jobs, a retrieval of jobs, if not immediate growth, because that is not going to happen anytime soon.
Thanks for that, Dr. Teware. Danos was
2020 or 2021.
sorry, Dr. Teware. Did you hear me?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, I just wanted to pass it on to one panelist, let them get a little say in there and then we start the exchange. Yeah?
Yes,
Dano,
are you hearing me?
yes.
Wait 1 minute. I thought that he went through lengths to deal with ease of doing business, but I do agree with Nakhid. The secret is really in the implementation, not the talk. There was a plan for agriculture that he identified as a 5-year plan for no taxes and incentivization of that sector. So I thought that was positive. There was a strategy for manufacturing, although he did not deal with the issue of export outside the energy sector. And there was a plan for construction having to do with housing and having to do with big construction, the road construction and so on, which I think are contradictory in these circumstances and raises the question of where government is going to get all this money, given the reduced expenditure that he mentioned, the more favorable revenue that he mentioned, the smaller deficit that he mentioned, and that is where I have some credibility issues. So I would say the two problems for me would be implementation and the credibility of the numbers. And thirdly, the way this was presented was also presented as a kind of medium-term plan rather than a pure annual budget. And it
Agreed.
is difficult to say what is for this year and what is for next year or the year after. So I will stop at this point. I'm sorry for taking so long.
Oh, not at all. Thanks a lot, Dr. Teware. And as I was going to say just now when I was trying to pass it to Danosuku, that all of a sudden the government realized that agriculture could play a key role in providing job sustainability, saving foreign exchange, creating entrepreneurs, downstream opportunities. All of a sudden, the same government that was laughing at Bodhi and Baji farmers last year and pumpkin farmers, if you remember in the parliament, it was a joke. Now all of a sudden they have an idea that agriculture can help, so they're pelting money at it. What do you think about this?
Good night, Philip. Good night to the panel and to all the viewers and listeners. As I
Good
said
night.
on an earlier interview, once again, it's a long shopping list. We have had promises from this minister over the last 5 years as what he intends to do for agriculture. many of which we have not yet realized. Government of the past, present government have continued to fail the sector. We have heard him talk about this recovery plan. When this pandemic started in March of this year, that is when government's supposed to take real initiatives to start to get this sector going. Food issues is most important in our country. And the roadmap committee did a wonderful plan. The Agriculture Society was part of that body that put together that plan. But we are hearing him talking about implementation in 2021. He didn't say if it's October of 2021. He didn't say if it's January, if it's May. So we will still continue to be sit idly and wait. He continued to talk about no taxes for agriculture. Most of the items in the agriculture sector are zero rated. There are no taxes on input supplies and so on. So we continue to hear all of this, what I will call old talk. But again, none of it, very little of it, I should say, is being implemented. What will be most frightening is if it is this $500 million goes back to the Ministry of Agriculture to possibly implement this plan. They have never written a plan and implemented in the last how many years in this country. None of these governments have done anything successful at the Ministry of Agriculture. So obviously, if that's the direction they intend to go, we continue to go in a negative way in the agriculture sector. So we are a bit disappointed. We were expecting some more clarity as to what direct intervention the government is going to make. Are you going to improve infrastructure? Are you going to look at better marketing strategies? We hear government buying the farmers' direct marketing program. What exactly are you talking about? When you buy this produce, what are you going to do with it? What are the commodities you're going to target? So there's a lot of clarity needed in that presentation. As far as we are concerned, we are more lost than most of you as to where we're going with the sector.
Somebody wrote that Budget 2021 was, actually it's Vasan Bharat wrote, Budget 2021 was a lackluster, nondescript, uninspiring and directionless wish list. It left the listener dazed and confused. It was a regurgitation of tired and worn programs. Youseph, representing the business community on this panel, what did you think of it?
I represent myself. All right. I see. Early in his budget presentation, he said, "We are leaving no one behind." Apparently, he has not visited Trin City Mall. He has not gone upstairs. He has not seen the video. He has not been driving around. He has not seen the other malls where people are out of business. A lot of people, these business owners and their workers, are left behind. They are way behind, and nobody looking at them. Now, I listened to the budget. There's not much specific, so you cannot say much. But I want to go to agriculture. You know, he raised the stamp duty incentive on first homeowners from 1.5 million to $2 million. But do you know, if a couple newly married and they want to live on an estate and buy an estate and put a house for $2 million, they have to pay $140,000 in stamp duty? Agricultural land attracts 7% stamp duty, just like if you buy land on Frederick Street. He has not addressed that. I think Ms. Suku will appreciate that. Then he took away all the incentive from the cars, you know, the hybrid cars and so on, and all the duties are back, and 3 years car or 3-year-old, so the price of cars is going to go up. But he didn't touch all the duty-free cars all these new parliamentarians going to get. He didn't touch it. You know, Dr. Teware will recall in 1986, the first act the late A.N.R. Robinson did in sacrificing took away 5% from the cabinet salaries. That was the first thing he did. Am I correct, Dr. Teware? He set an example. He set an example. But these guys, they living it up and they telling you, sacrifice, do all. And I want to say something in general. I see Professor Patrick Watson touch on it, that about this subsidy. So you, as a politician, all these years, say things good. You give me cheap electricity, cheap water, cheap gas, cheap thing. And when things are good, where I could afford to pay them. Now that things bad, things hard, you are telling me, boy, this is the cost. You have to pay for it. But you got me accustomed to those things, to that standard of living. And now you are taking it away from me. I mean, it's not my fault that the electricity cheap for so long and water rate is cheap for so long. That's not my fault. I will close that. I'll stop at this.
Paid Seereeram, the
Yeah.
banker on the. Good evening. What did you think of the budget?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Philip. As a banker and finance expert, if I may add, the first thing I will look at is the revenue they're projecting and the expenditure. They're projecting revenues of 41. And the first thing you do, you say, okay, what was last year? Last year was 34. With an economy that is falling apart worse than last year, you're saying, look, immediately you will say that is not possible. I don't believe that. If a finance guy comes and gives me that as a board of on the board of director, I'll say, please explain this to me. So the 41, in my view, is not possible. But let's. How are you going to do it? If a number is unrealistic, then it throws out all your remaining plans. All your remaining plans. But let's go forward. It said they're going to spend 49.5 and there's a deficit of 8. But they qualify that 8. And they've been doing this for years. And I think it's incumbent upon Senator Nakhid to ask this question. If your deficit that they're projecting is 8 net of capital payments and sinking fund contributions, why didn't they put -8, and then when you minus now your capital payments, how much that is? My estimate is about 8 billion, and your sinking fund contribution might be a little less than $1 billion. So you have to add another $9 billion to that deficit that you're projecting there. And I hope, I've been talking about this for years, and you cannot run a business without understanding the numbers. Without understanding the numbers, what are you doing? Plants here and there and everywhere, and it's going to collapse. So, in my humble view, this budget is going to collapse in three months, and they have to come back to Parliament with something. Another magician going to come. But what were the assumptions? We always ask the assumption. When somebody comes, a junior officer comes with some kind of budget, we say, what are your assumptions? There was no discussion on the assumptions for the preparation of this budget. Remember, a budget is a mathematical representation of your strategic plan. I didn't see a strategic plan. I saw some numbers. I didn't see a strategic plan because it was all over the place. And if your numbers are incorrect, it means to say you cannot execute any strategic plan and you'll be floundering from day one. But the assumptions now, you have to ask the gentleman, that's the Minister of Finance, what are your assumptions? They made an assumption with regards to COVID, and this is what I deducted from that COVID-19 will be resolved soon and we'll be back to normal. So the opposition has to ask what were the assumptions with regards to COVID and the question of distancing, the question of numbers getting together. So you need to ask that question. Otherwise, all major industries, such as the tourist industry, is dead. Might be dead for 3 years. We don't know. What are your assumptions? Why should you be now spending money on tourism, capital expenditure, when we don't know when? So what, if you're going to spend money on the airport, can you please show us the numbers where you're going to get payback? Because the government at the moment is broke. They're broke.
Agreed.
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 That is you raised a very important point. A lot of people have been raising the point since the budget has been read. Everybody's been asking. This looked like gymnastics, smoke and mirrors. A lot of statements without any numbers to back it up. And everybody who is writing any commentary at all, they're asking the same questions. Where are the facts to back up these statements?
That is correct. So let us examine what assumptions they made. They made another assumption that bank will have unlimited appetite to lend to government. Is that true or false? That's very questionable. The debt to GDP ratio, they have not been accurately determining that, and I'll give you an example. The debt, they say they're considering government debt as only the bank debt. But that is not a definition of debt. Debt, you include VAT outstanding, you include all the supplies that you haven't paid for years, all of that, you have to include it in debt. But that is government debt, but when it comes to the denominator, it is revenue for the whole country. So I'm asking a question, why don't you put government debt over government revenues? That is their portion of the GDP. Or alternatively, many countries apply the debt to GDP by putting the debt of government and the private sector, including businesses as well as the household. So you have a bastard ratio that is governing the direction of policies. So they assume out of all of this, projected revenues will be realized. Whenever you're doing a projection, whenever you're doing a strategic plan, it is the assumptions that come under question. And Senator Nakhid, the role of the opposition is very crucial. There's no sense going to Parliament and say, but this one lie and that one lie, etc. Time for that passed. We need to be professional and ask professional questions.
Yeah, we do.
Right?
Yeah, we do. Thanks for that,
So
Jane.
we need very professional behavior on the part of the opposition as well, because it is easy to poke your fingers in the government's eyes, and it is easy for them. It becomes a sword fight on a sinking ship. That's what it becomes.
Indeed.
I'll end for now.
Professor Watson, I want to bring you in here because I need to ask you, without underpinning facts, somebody is sending me some information. VAT estimate for 2020 was 6.7 billion. For 2021 is 7.4 billion. Contracting in an economy expected to contract by 6%. How did you jump VAT $700 million in a contracting economy?
Well, they are. Let me start by saying I wanted to join the conversation in a somewhat different way. Whatever is good or bad about this budget, we have to remember with whom we are dealing. This government, this PNM administration, does not have a history of delivering on anything. And we have to be very, very mindful that even if there is anything good in it, they are going to flounder on the delivery. Many people use the word implementation, and it is in the implementation of these things that they always falter. You cannot trust them to deliver. And yes, some of the figures may be wrong, like the 41 billion, the $45 for the price of oil, because notwithstanding the fact that we are more a gas economy, 45 is a reasonable.
Yeah, the 45 and $3 might both be wrong.
Yeah, and the $3 in particular, because it doesn't look anything like the current price. So there's an assumption that it is going to rise to these levels. Normally, if you look at previous budgets, we go below what the standard prices. Now they are somewhat above what the current prices. So I have serious concerns about them being able to deliver. Well, let me take them at their word, and let's say that this will happen. Let me tell you a grave concern that I have with what they are calling, and it is part of the roadmap as well, the expansionary thing. In this country, and many countries like ours, there is a stumbling block, a wall that we run up against in the form of our foreign exchange reserves. Whenever we spend money, and whenever I cut your tax and give you more money, you are going to spend that money on things that are largely foreign exchange using. And you must bear this in mind. Every time, so that extra $1,000 or so, or the $3,000 that he boasted about that you're going to get, When you attempt to spend that, even when you spend it on what appears to be local production, you think about what local production is. Local production has a lot of foreign input inside of it. If we do not, in a hurry, find a way to generate foreign exchange, all of these things will eventually come to naught. So you're going to expand the economy to what effect? You're going to expand, you're going to demand manufacturing goods. Manufacturers will produce more, but in order for manufacturers to produce more, manufacturers must import more. Manufacturers, the input into the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector at this point in time is not net earners of foreign exchange. Only the oil and gas sector remains net earners of foreign exchange. That is why our foreign reserves are falling. It went from 11 billion technically to 7, but that 7 includes 2 billion of borrowing in recent times. So it's now about 5 billion. That's US dollars, which is not a bad figure, notwithstanding. But the fact is, in 5 years, it was cut in half. And if we continue like this and we are not using any sector to generate foreign exchange, and the manufacturing sector has not been doing that, it is going to fall even further. And sooner or later, the demand that you are generating with the increases in discretionary income that you're giving to people is going to run up against a block of foreign exchange reserves. That is going to have several consequences. I see a lot of people talking about devaluation. These days are no longer as in the 1980s. In fact, this stopped in 1993. The government, the Minister of Finance does not come out one day and say, well, the rate of exchange is now. That is something that is managed by the central bank, probably with the influence, the heavy influence in this PNM administration of the Minister of Finance. He looks like he behaves very much as if he's the governor of the central bank, in addition to being the Minister of Finance. What they do is they manage the float, the rate of exchange by putting money into the system and, if necessary, taking money out of the system. And what they do is they make sure that the rate of exchange does not run away. They may decide what they want it to be, but they don't come up and make it as a dictum as George Chambers used to do. That those days are gone. That does not happen. So what is likely to happen if there is a increase in demand for foreign products, and that is inevitably going to happen? The rate of exchange there's going to be a depreciation of the dollar. In order to save the foreign exchange, the central bank is going to stop running in to prop it up, and you're going to find yourself going more and more into our dollar is now heavily overvalued, sorry. And we are benefiting from a overvalued currency to buy things abroad. And the more you make that money available, the more people are going to demand goods and services that in the end are going to require the use of foreign exchange. But there is no foreign exchange earner except oil and gas, and that is not to be relied upon. I mean, you're seeing, for several reasons, that even if the price rises, our production of oil and gas has been falling in recent years. When I was a little boy, I remember my father used to tell me, he worked in the oil, we produce 100,000 barrels a day. And I grew up saying something, for the first time in my own lifetime, the barrel is now about 60,000 barrels a day that we produce. And the gas is not compensating for that. So we have a serious problem ahead of us if we do not find ways of encouraging entrepreneurship, innovation, some of the things that we have been studying at the university. How to make people go into production of goods and services that earn us foreign exchange, we are going to run into serious trouble. Yes, there will be an increased demand. Some people will get rich because they will produce more, you will buy more, but we are going to run up against this wall, this constraint of foreign exchange availability. And I am not satisfied at all that was addressed both in the roadmap to recovery. Now, in all fairness, the roadmap to recovery, as where it went so far, is only in the short run. They need to put people back on a certain footing. But in the meanwhile, you have to think about the sustainability of all of this. And I am not seeing how this, I am very worried, in fact. I'm very, very, very worried. You take even the agricultural sector, we complain about the high import bill. The high import bill is a reality. But why is it a worry? It's because we are not earning the foreign exchange. It's not only because we have a taste that many countries right in the Caribbean have what the economists will call an absolute advantage over us in the agricultural sector and a comparative advantage over us in the agricultural sector. We are going to find it very, very difficult to compete, even in the area of marijuana. People seem to think we have countries like Jamaica and St. Vincent are streaks ahead of us in the production of marijuana. And other goods and services. When you go on the CARICOM market, the yams and so on, and the people in the market boast, boy, this is not no local yam here, no, this Vinci yam. You understand?
That's the point.
Anyway.
If you're going to put taxes on foreign fruits to say you're going to promote the sale of local fruits, where those local fruits coming from? Most of the fruits that we buy in the grocery that we call local fruits coming on the CARICOM jetty.
No, but then it's not local. Then there's a mistake. You see, I want to say local is local, but let's take the local production. A lot of local production is, even in agriculture and manufacturing, but manufacturing more than agriculture, requires the use of foreign inputs. You understand that is the point. So you buy a yam that was grown in Maruga, let's say. All right, but what went into that yam came from China and Russia and all kinds of places. That you have to be mindful of that. The essential point I'm making is that whereas to build the agricultural sector, we need to get something that will earn us foreign exchange, not just save foreign exchange. We must earn the foreign exchange. Oil and gas is not doing it for us anymore.
Phillip, can I just interject a little here on agriculture?
Go ahead.
Professor was just talking about focusing on the local production, which I totally agree with. But let me also say that there are thousands of acres of agricultural land, 2-acre plots that were given out to the former Cardi 1975 limited workers. And these plots, up to today, many of those plots are still lying idle. And therefore, we need to encourage those farmers to utilize their agricultural plots. And that is
Ramona,
a
you must ask the question, why are they idle?
Well, that's it. You see, in many instances, you need to upgrade the infrastructure to access these agricultural plots. You need the roads, you need water, you need other amenities so that you can encourage the farmers to go and to cultivate these agricultural plots. But we need the government to give the incentives and to also encourage that the use of these agricultural plots actually happen as soon as possible.
But there also the incentive to grow. There's also the issue of, you're talking about fruits, a mango and an avocado, you can't plant it today and pick it tomorrow. So this is something that they should have had a plan for, that they should have put things in place for. And it seemed that the minister was throwing things against the wall and seeing what was going to stick for tomorrow's conversation. This $900 million
There is no doubt that all governments have ignored agriculture. Ms. Danu is correct. All the governments have ignored agriculture, and only now they want to run and talk about it. You know what agriculture contributes to the GDP? 1%. What kind of thing is that?
Less than 1%.
Well, let's say 1%. And what is that? That is nothing. And you know why that is so? They just lip service it. If you win the election and they put you in parliament, the last thing you want to be is Minister of Agriculture. That's the most unglamorous ministry to be part of. You're in the doghouse when they make you Minister of Agriculture.
We've destroyed the field. Wassa's taken away pumps from farmers who needed water for their crops. Predial larceny is the biggest problem that farmers face. You spend
respect agriculture and the farmers. That's the point. They ignore. They treat the farmers with contempt.
So the minister pensioned $500 million at agriculture in our budget statement, and as other people have alluded to, promises may not materialize. How do we know going to actually jumpstart or kickstart agriculture with that. They need more than just some money. You need a plan. You need, as Ramona was
Philip,
saying, roads, water security. You need to be able to outline those things. And I am hoping, and that's why I'm happy to Senator David Nakhid here. I am hoping the opposition down to details.
Look at what they did with the laptops.
listen,
They stopped
Philip,
it.
I know we're going to be beaten down that door because everybody here has been correct. No government has given agriculture the necessary attention. That's patently clear. And with agriculture being less than 1% of GDP, that contributes to our GDP, I mean, you can't say anything more, you can't add anything to that. That's bad enough as it is. I mean, we are not even sure about our own food security. Now, starting from point zero, you can only go up. So we have basically been at point zero as far as our agricultural production is concerned. And this is not politics, but as I said, I try to look at it very impartially. I look at Clarence Shambarat, the Minister of Agriculture, and I wonder from all his writings before, and I've asked him this, what has he done for agriculture? What has, in the last 5 years? I can only speak to that because now that I've come back into Trinidad and Tobago and into the politics of it, I can see that nothing has been done for that sector. Now, if you show, as you say, an additional surplus that they herald like it's a big thing for agriculture, we've given an additional stimulus of 500 million to add. What is that to get us going as a country to make us food secure? That has to be the question. Don't be fooled by the numbers. What makes us food secure? That is the question. Not the numbers they're throwing in a budget.
We need a target. We need to stop calling what we hit the goal. We need to, and I'm using football terminology for you, we need to actually know where the goal is.
Exactly. What is, you don't make us food secure by telling me that you have given an additional surplus of 500 million, and that might sound good to the people who will clap you for that. But we know, and I'm sure Ms. Suku will say that as well, that is peanuts compared to where we need to be as a aspiring food secure nation. It's nothing.
Yeah.
And all those little things that we can mention. All those little, sorry, my last one. All those that can mention about improvement of infrastructure, completely correct. Making it a little easier for the whole value supply chain for farmers from actually going to market. All of that 100% correct. But unless there's sufficient investment and sufficient incentive, we're going to be talking about this the same time next year. The same time next year.
Well, as far as I can see, we'll be talking about this for the next 10 years, not next year. But Professor Watson introduced a very, very important point. Let us look at this problem. How do we manage our foreign exchange? Because without foreign exchange, as we did by the year, we had $3.3 billion in 1982. I'm familiar with that period because I was managing corporate accounts, including Neil and Massey and all the cars and car companies and so on, including Trinity Motors. So I'm familiar with that decade. And we had a very bad recession. In fact, it turned out to be a depression, given the length of time. And we are going to face a very severe depression now. Let us not make no bones about it. Let us not feel that we are going to get out of this by next year and everything will be fine. That is not the case. The whole question of, if you look at global trends, the whole question of globalization is being reversed very, very rapidly. At the moment, China is going to come onto the food market. The whole rice crop has been wiped out. You could imagine 1.4 billion people buying rice in the market. What's going to happen with the price of rice? So let's take one commodity. We had reached up to 20% to satisfy our demand in rice in Trinidad. Now it's far less than that. We can say, look, within 5 years, What are the resources for us to reach that objective? And if we don't have a plan, we're not going to go anywhere. I've raised this so many times on the radio and other shows, and the Minister of Agriculture said, this is what he said, that Trinidad is too small for us to grow the rice necessary to feed ourselves. When I researched it, all we need is 15,000 acres. That's all we need. We should be self-sufficient in rice. I had made many representations to different governments to start back the sugar industry, the sugar cane industry, where zero waste policy. In other words, we can start back growing sugar cane today. And our first step is to satisfy the needs for Angostura. First step, without even making sugar, we can make sweet molasses and supply. That gives 3 times the yield. So there are many things we can do. I have imported seeds for very, very expensive trees, sandalwood trees. 3 of them are growing. If the government had the resources and the imagination, I'm talking government, not PNM and UNC, they both failed in agriculture. They could have planted over 1,000 acres in high quality trees 15 years ago, and we would have had mahogany, we would have teak, we would have sip, we would have a variety. And CPEP people, they like to cut grass, they could have cut grass in between. Japan has appropriate technology where they are planting yam. I was so shocked. One person in Japan handles a small machine, plants acres of they call it taro. That's the edos, and they make a meal out of these things. Are we so lazy? We don't have access to computers to know what to do? Please explain that. And then we pat ourselves on the back by saying that we are so bright and we are so educated.
So let's come to this, right? Because everybody says every year that the budget is not really a factual document. That what they write on that paper and what they say, there is nobody checking it in 12 months to see that we actually, there's nobody following it up in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. There's no accountability for the budget. And the budget is the important document that sets where we're going as a nation, and you can't even put faith in that. Where are we actually going as a country? If that one act of parliament, the only act of parliament that parliament has to do or it collapses, if we can't even trust that, what's the point of the whole thing if Trinidadians can't even get from the government of the day a clear roadmap? This is our detailed income. These are our detailed expenditure items so that the public could have a say. What's the point of the exercise?
Okay. As a CEO of a company, what you require, a budget on a monthly basis. And at the end of each month, management come to Parliament and explain to the shareholders, because the opposition are representatives of shareholders as well. Every month they come and tell us, look, these are the budgets we meet with regards to revenues, and we are meeting it, or the reasons we are shortfall, and you give a variance analysis. Now that should be incorporated as a constitutional requirement with regards to accountability for the management of this country.
Correct, the budget a one-day thing. Ramona, you were in government. Bhoe, you were in government. You all have been there. Why doesn't a budget come with built-in measurables, metrics, deliverables, deadlines, dates, so that we could know in 6 months this 150 million has been spent on that's supposed to be right? This, give us an update. Where are we with that? How come that is not the case, and why haven't we ever, as a nation, as Vale is suggesting, grown to a place where the legal requirements for a budget should come with following up the budget?
Well, sorry. Go ahead, Doctor.
I don't want to go back into the past, but when the People's Partnership was in office, we did a budget. We had a monitoring and evaluation unit, and we laid in Parliament, not in 2011, but in 2012, in 2013, in 2014. We didn't lay in 2015. And this government never continued the process. Performance and evaluation based on the priorities of the medium-term plan and the budget. Perhaps that was not publicized well. I know for a fact that there was a unit established in related to this in 2013 or 14 that was supposed to look at the nitty-gritty details. I remember the former head of Ernst & Young came into that ministry for that particular thing. So it's not that it has not been done, but I want to say a couple of things related to that issue. You know, if you do not have measurement and evaluation and accountability that is sincere and truthful and authentic, then really what you do is lay the foundation for lack of accountability and lack of scrutiny and lack of assessment of performance. And I think the PNM as a government is always more comfortable with that kind of climate and environment. The second thing is that in any society, if you do not have systems that function and that are efficient and effective, and in which you could follow processes and stages to the outcome, so that at the end of the day, you are accountable for what that outcome is. You have timelines and so on. Then with that dysfunctionality, you inevitably have corruption.
So,
and I think
Dr.
that
Teware,
is a problem.
Why People's Partnership, instead of doing that as a way of doing business, why they didn't pass that as a law?
I don't know that. I mean, we didn't think of it as a law. We developed it as a system for
But you saw a need,
monitoring and evaluation.
but you saw a
And we
need for it.
didn't
So why?
pass it as a law. There are countries now that pass what you call fiscal rules into law. We could try to do that. One of the things that was lacking in this budget is that besides the budget that you had, the special allocations that you had, 500 million for agriculture and other things, besides the debt because besides the level of the debt to GSHO, and all those big projects from road to Manzalina, Point Porter Highway, other things that they mentioned, they in Tobago, and its implications for government spending, government financing, and government borrowing. In spite of all of these things that it seems impossible for a government to do and implement in a year, there is nothing that addresses the question of what you might call fiscal boundaries or fiscal restraint or fiscal rule. And I think that is another reason for concern. Also, a number of things that are mentioned, all the construction that they are talking about in housing, and how they're going to do $1 billion in basically in contracts to do housing. The issue of how you procure that, who gets the contract, whether there is corruption or competitiveness or competition or what, all of these. So I think what is happening is that in spite of the fact that the economy is collapsing, in spite of the fact that you have high unemployment, in spite of the fact that you have businesses that are basically closing, and perhaps some of them will not be able to recover, and we have to meet this challenge of a recovery. The spending and the borrowing is not in any way controlled, managed, or accounted for. And I think those are real problems, not
Dr.
just with the budget, but with the government.
I need to interrupt you for a
Philip,
second.
let me
I'm giving it back to
let
you
me
right now. I just want to answer somebody who's writing on the thread. The size of the panel and the amount of phone calls that myself and Satish Ramsaran made to make sure this panel is balanced across the spectrum. Somebody just said on the thread that this is not a balanced panel, and I want to rubbish that statement now, because a lot of people, including existing current members of government, had an opportunity to come here and speak and say and defend themselves. And we're going to have to do this all week and bring in different people. And to the person who is trolling the page, and I want to tell everybody else looking on, that we invited every single type of person. In fact, Garvin Nicholas was advertised as to be here. He gave way for Dano Suku because of the sudden change in the budget, and it was an agriculture budget. So tomorrow we'll be doing national security. So please don't tell me this is not a balanced panel, because we did our endeavor best to try and get as many inputs as possible. Back to you, Ramona.
Yeah, I just want to interject and just expand on the point that Dr. Teware made, is that the only thing that is somewhat accurate, the only figures that are somewhat accurate in these budget estimates fall under recurrent expenditure. So where you have salary, wages, COLA, you have maintenance of vehicles, purchase of vehicles, just general everyday expenses within ministries and the THA, those are the only things, those figures are the only reliable figures or somewhat accurate figures that you can rely on to measure. But when it comes to the developmental projects and the macro projects that a government undertakes in terms of development, you can never be, those estimates are never reliable.
And I find that hard to take. I find that statement hard to take. And so
And I'll give
again,
you
without
an example. Let me give you a quick example. Whilst I was opposition member, I shadowed tourism and Tobago affairs for 5 years. And every year in the budget, under developmental projects for agriculture, under agriculture, there would always be an allocation of $45 million for estate roads. Right? Listen to me carefully. So every year during the Standing Finance Committee, I would question the spending, the expenditure of the $45 million, and ask for the location of these estate roads in terms of the agricultural development in Tobago. And it was repetitive, the answers we got, because there's an obligation for the THA to answer your questions of the Standing Finance Committee. They were never able to meet that 45 million or to show evidence of estate roads constructed at the tune of 45 to 50 million dollars every fiscal year. And I'm sure that this year is no different.
and again, Ramona, they've circulated some numbers, and then they say that it adds up to 41 billion, but if you just check, it doesn't. Nothing, not even that basic document. So one of my questions that I had to ask the panel, especially those of you who have been in government and in parliament, where do we get the actual factual breakdown of this expenditure, this $7.5 billion for the Ministry of Education at a time when schools are closed? Where do we get the breakdown of how exactly that money is to be spent?
You would get a
Yeah.
partial understanding of it next year during Standing Finance Committee when you're examining the estimates for this year. Yeah, you'll get those answers next year, because you will have the actual allocations that were given for 2021, 2020, 2021. So next year, when you're examining the estimates, you will be asking for this year's allocation.
Yeah,
But the
Ramon, I think he
minister
wants
in
to
his
know where the
wind-up, and I just want to say this, the minister in his wind-up was disingenuous, deceitful, and misleading when he said that a budget statement cannot cover everything, but they had raised a point earlier. And this is the most important point. A budget has to be something that you can rely on.
Yeah, I think if I may answer, I think there's a book of estimates that the government
There is
prints. So I
and
think it's
it's
available.
online now, eh? It's online. You
It's
could go and
online,
get it.
right?
It's on.
Right.
And, you,
So
It's on
the
and that
details are
the
there.
always,
website.
yeah, that always
Yeah,
gives the details of the thing. And
details. Yeah.
I mean, I have no doubt that an error can be made in the adding up, eh? But I somehow I
Lots of
don't think that
errors.
there's any, yeah, but I don't think that there's
So,
such a serious
Philip,
error that they're going to be. Go
what you're
ahead,
going to
Ramon.
be
Can I get
seeing,
something here?
what you're going to be seeing in this, but in these estimates are the expenditures for last year also. So
Yeah.
this standing finance committee is where you will really get a full appreciation of what was spent last year.
Yeah, what was
And
actual, but for the budget, they have the details of it. But I want to raise a very important point. If a company goes to the bank says, show me your financial statements. It comprises of at least two sets of statements. One is your balance sheet, and one is your profit and loss. Then they also look at the cash flows and so on. But by and large, do you know up till now, we are still preparing government accounts on a cash basis and not on an accrual basis? Government of Barbados since 2007 prepares a balance sheet, you know. You can go to the government of Barbados and see. So we don't even have a ledger. We do not have a ledger for payables in Trinidad. And Dr. Farrell did disclose that a few months ago. He said, look, there's no ledger on accounts payable in the government. And how can you now prepare the status of your finance if you do not have a balance sheet? And I think that's a major accomplishment. And Senator Nakhid, if Ramona and Dr. Teware is no longer there, you should make that as an issue. I'll be glad to give you a whole list of things to make an issue in the upper house.
And Mr. Seereeram, let me
That
also
issue of
interject.
accrual,
On, there is also an
just a quick
issue of
point. That
unaudited accounts for years gone by. Again, there are many state agencies where there have been unaudited accounts for the past 10 years or more. And the
Well,
Auditor
okay. Well, then
General,
say you're not going to get any allocation until we see the audited account. That's simple. I was a director of the FCB, and we had that particular problem, and we worked 24 hours and got the
Sorry to cut you
documents
off.
done.
I want to ask a question
I
about
yeah, but
just just
the
a quick
minister
point
said,
on the
yeah,
accrual accounting. The Public Accounts Committee has made that recommendation that they make the change to accrual accounting for the last 3 years at least, and I don't know when it's going to happen.
yes. From a point of accounting, I saw the minister said they plan to build 25,000 homes for the next 5 years. My question is how many homes they have built for the past 5 years? If they are going to build 25,000, how many homes they have built for the past 5 years? I mean, they come and say all kind of thing, and we discussing, but they're really telling us just hot air. They didn't build 1,000
They,
homes, but they want to build 25,000 in the next 5
they
years.
built about
And
they
the
built
next thing,
about
yes, Dr. Teware, you said they built about,
no, I was going to say based on houses that they finished during our time. In other
well,
words,
these are
houses
houses
that
that
we
Phillip that
left.
built 10 years ago.
No, based on houses that were not completed in our time, and
Right.
based
just,
on what the PNM did, they built 2,000 houses in the last 5 years.
Okay, no problem. The next
I
So
point I want to ask, I am not an accountant.
25,000 for 5 years sounds hard.
I, I am not an accountant, but he said that the expenditure is 41 billion. That is our, and we have 4 billion for developmental program. Okay, so the next 4 billion, they're going to borrow 8 billion because that is the deficit. Am I correct? The deficit is 8 billion. So 4 billion for developmental program. The next 4 billion they're going to borrow and pay interest for expenditure, for recurrent expenditure. So we're borrowing money to pay salaries. And which businessman could go to the bank to borrow money to pay salaries? You bust already. You're going out of business.
But
Yeah.
Gus, it seems that what they did was that they totaled up what they wanted to spend and then tried to force income to suit that and taxation. I asked, now is not the time for a property tax. No matter who you are, you have to know. Now is not the time for a property tax. Giving them a
No.
sweetie and raising the tax threshold from 6,000 to 7,000 and say you're helping 250,000 people, that's a farce. The real people in the economy right now you're supposed to be pampering is the middle class who are going to create jobs. You're going to come and bust their head property tax on their business property, on their home property, on the primary dwelling. Now is not the time for that. What they should have done was gone through that expenditure column and taken out expenses that we do not need, like justice
And
on time, prison transport, like renting all of these buildings from friends, financiers, and family members. All of this, we are not supposed to be looking to uphold those benefits to financiers. Right now, what the government should have done is reduce the expenditure side. CPEP, the vast majority of money in CPEP goes to the contract owner, not to the worker. If you want to give those people a handout, give them the handout directly. We say 50% of that $1 billion. Things like that. And I hope that Senator Nakhid and others in the opposition, because we don't have a voice in the parliament, our system is set up like that. The rest of the country have to sit and watch like if we're watching a football game. I hope Senator Nakhid raises these points in the parliament and pin the government down on them.
Philip, let me quickly say also on your issue with property tax. The minister said today something very interesting. He said that only 50% of the land in Trinidad and Tobago is valued. So what about the other 50% and in which areas? So, and then the other question begs, when you implement property tax, only 50% of those homeowners will be paying. What about the other 50% that has not been valued as yet? Would they now have to pay retroactive until you value that other 50% of the
Or,
land in Trinidad and Tobago?
or are they getting a back?
Yeah, Philip, I've written extensively on the property tax and I've researched it a bit. It is so complicated. Before, it was a fairly small amount people were paying, but now it's becoming so complicated because if the real estate, if the government comes and value this house, a rental value, by the way, rental value, and to ask me to pay tax on it, I'll say no. I'd prefer if you rent it and we'll share in the rental. What are you going to do then? I prefer if the government rent it. We are in a serious problem. Whilst a lot of persons might be living in, sorry.
Change your name to now.
Well, a lot of persons, families could be living in a big house. Not that my house is big, but the point is they might be unemployed at the moment. They might be unemployed. Unemployment rate is exceedingly high. It's over 20%. Before COVID, one of the university professors believed that it was about 15% then. So we are probably 25%, and we don't even have the data to deal with these issues. Pre-COVID, our poverty in Trinidad was over 20%, and that was done by international agencies. They estimated it to be 20%. What do you think it is after COVID? So we are a poor country now, still believe we are rich, and we opening our little beaks, looking at the Minister of Finance, hoping that he will drop something in it. And I'm telling you, we require an austerity budget. The longer we delay it, it becomes more and more difficult.
But, and I just want to put this to the panel, shouldn't we have focused on reducing non-essential expenditure and putting that money towards spurring the economy forward, creating jobs, creating opportunity for people to come and create jobs? Shouldn't that be where the focus should have been?
Philip, it is true, but then it's a political decision as to what constitutes non-essential. And you mentioned in CPAP, in fact, the official rate of unemployment is very low in this country. It's about 6 or 7%. And in fact, and when people talk about it being theoretically higher, it's because a good 10% of this employment is in CPAP and UP. So you really have to add it to the numbers. But on paper, we have one of the lowest unemployment rates, and we always have had, compared even to the United States of America and so on. Poverty is another matter. Poverty, they don't measure poverty all the time, but people think it could be as high as about 25% now. And yes, unemployment would have increased in COVID, but on the basis of the official statistics, it is not bad. Now you identify things like the expenditure on rentals and so on, and people enrich themselves. They will then tell you that they have no place to house these people, and they have to pay. They have to pay this. They have to pay this rent. So if you could really identify non-essentials, everybody will agree with that as a definition, that a non-essential should be taken out. But one of the problems with the budgetary process is that 90%, I probably am exaggerating a bit here, of the expenditure is already decided for you. And the process is one of finding the money to pay that 90%, which is what is doing. That is why the discretionary spending on things like on what is part of the PSIP and so on is a bit complicated, because they don't, and then there's all kinds of confusions about getting the right permissions and so on. So you'd find that halfway through the budgetary exercise, they spend 1 cent, I exaggerate again, on capital expenditure, and then there's a mad rush coming down to the end to spend a lot of it, and people end up buying all kinds of foolish things like fancy cars and so on. These things are always the process. Well, I worked on it as a scholarly exercise, and we recommended that the budgetary process should be over 2 years, because 1 year is not enough for, and apparently it's unconstitutional as well. They have to change the constitution to do that, and so on. But the whole process is flawed. And if you have a lot of people stacked up in there doing nothing and collecting a salary, you have a serious problem on your hands. By the way, Ghassan keeps talking about a business going. A government is not like a business. A government can go to a bank even with those kinds of problems, because they have the money to do that.
Professor Watson, I wanted to say to you that there are justifications that you could raise for certain expenditures, but they don't even have those justifications for some of these expenditures that they're trying to build and spend on right now.
Philip, could I ask a question? Could I ask, how much money and resources this country required to govern itself? I have to ask that question. In 2008, when we had the global financial crash, the government of Saudi Arabia instructed all their ministries, do not buy a chair, do not buy furniture, do not buy cars, and they gave them strict instructions what not to do. Do we have the courage to do that in Trinidad? And I'm saying this for the simple reason, what this budget has done, and if we follow it or try to follow it, we are just ushering Trinidad and Tobago into the arms of the IMF, who will then give us instruction, as they did in Barbados over the years, as they did in other countries, as they did in Pakistan. So we have to be very careful. If we do not try to manage our own economy, we are just making it worse. Our debt to revenue ratio is over 500%, and we cannot sustain this. It's not sustainable. One of the reasons why we have reached in this trap is because of reckless banking. When you as an individual, as Mayor said, you cannot just go to the bank and ask them for loan. They will look at all your financials and they will run you if your debt is so high and you have to borrow money to meet interest payments. We are borrowing money to meet interest payments. And our austerity budget must be implemented by austerity measures taken on the government itself. They have to have a salary cut, as they did in other countries. India, I think, took a 15%. I think St. Lucia took 28. I think, go ahead.
The government costs $100 million, but public service salaries is $20 billion according to Colin Wood. That's what needs being paid attention to.
Remember,
that has
please
always
remember.
Been bloated. That has always been bloated.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to say.
No, but,
that has always been a bloated for the economy.
Yeah, Senator, that has to be addressed. It has to start from on top. Do you know we have an upside down economy pyramid? Few people are actually in the what I will call the real economy. The rest is all in between and depending on the fewer and fewer. And people don't realize that the export market, the manufacturers who are exporting, they are exporting subsidies. Take away the subsidies and they fall flat. Take away the subsidies. Government can no longer, and they sort of setting up the country in a way where all those subsidies on gas, on water and electricity, we are paying 5 US cents per kilowatt hour. There are other rates in the Caribbean. I know for a fact Ghana is 37.
But wait, I wanted to lead to that point though, and Senator Nakhid was going with it because the numbers after the shutdown of Petrotrin, the numbers at Wassa, the numbers at ArcelorMittal, the man said he fired the management, he kept the staff, and he made one of the most profitable companies in the world. Our problem is too many jobs for the boys, too many political trolls and sycophants and operatives of political parties are being paid with public funds. David, you was talking about that. Tell me some more.
Yeah, and I think, well, when you address something like that, then you get political. Because you have a PNM, the PNM who has been in power for basically 43 years or 50. And they have bloated that sector, public services sector, to their own benefit. They are fully writ large in charge of most of the public institutions. And they pay that, you said it costs $100 billion, and it's impossible for an economy like ours that has never diversified to carry that weight. We are top heavy. And that has what has brought us, in my opinion, slowly to our knees. Now, would it take us into the arms eventually of the IMF with our austerity program? Unless we implement an austerity program, I differ with that. I think the government has not shown the necessary creativity to give us new revenue streams. I think, and I will get a bit political here, I think the UNC has a manifesto with new revenue streams that could have been implemented. I do agree that the property tax at this point in time is oppressive. There should be, and I might have some kickback from my own people on this, but there should be, if that is implemented, some form of civil disobedience. Because you cannot at this point in time where people are basically suffering, and I know this because I'm on the ground. I've never left the ground, and I see the need is coming in as much as it did when we began with COVID, or even more so, and it's going to get worse. So someone said that this government probably will not last 5 years. I would think that maybe we'll see some serious civil disobedience within the next 3 to 6 months.
So, as we come into the last half hour of the show, I want to throw it to each of the guests to give me in about 3 or 4 minutes what you would have suggested should have been done. What you thought should have been the purpose of this budget. And as she's the quietest person on the panel, I'll start with Dano and we'll move forward from there. Yeah, Dano, in 4 or 5 minutes, tell me, what would you have suggested in all that you've heard and all has been discussed and what you heard the minister say today? What would you have suggested should have been done? We're not hearing you, Dano. We're not hearing you. Your audio might be off, it might muted.
I don't think she's hearing you.
I think she's hearing me, but we're not hearing her. And it looks like she has to take a reboot. I don't know. So I guess Gus, you could take it from there. When Dano comes back, we'll bring her in.
Yes. I thought the budget will have take how you can take advantage of COVID. This COVID is part of our life now. We have to live with it. But we are in the Caribbean. Some other Caribbean islands are encouraging the Americans to come. We should be encouraging some kind of tourists under some rules and regulations and certain protocol and see we could earn some foreign exchange. I think we can do that. We can be innovative instead of closing the country. And COVID is we moved from blaming Kamala to blaming COVID. That's what we did in this budget. We moved from Kamala to COVID. But I thought that some brainstorming could take place and see how we can take advantage instead of being a cost to you. It probably could have been a surplus, a positive to you. Well, and to take the position, for instance, this property tax. I think property tax should be on rented properties and occupied properties, not on rental value. Because if you have it on rental value, you're going to have so many buildings that are empty and you're charging them property tax. Where are they going to get the money from to pay? They're going to lose their buildings, their lifelong savings. We need to think these things through. Thank you.
Gus, you still have some time, and if you wanted, you could give me any recommendations in any of the sectors that you think that should have been touched to accomplish what you said should have been accomplished. And you could also say,
yes. I think tourism should have had much more time than he did and much more pay attention to tourism. Even agriculture, giving them 500 billion and talking about the total money of agriculture is 1.6 billion. Do you know, to me, agriculture should be linked to health. We're spending what? $5.2 billion on health. It's how you eat, you end up in the hospital or you stay well. We should be the two should be connected.
Yes.
They say that if you eat proper food, you don't need no tablets. And if you eat bad food, no tablets no good to you. So that we need to pay attention to those two things to me. But he spent more time on energy than tourism, agriculture put together. I listen to him. They're still hoping energy will rebound and they will have money to spend.
Dano, you're back? Dano? Still not hearing you. Professor Watson, if you were in that seat today, what would you advocate implemented?
I want to start by saying that it's an extremely difficult seat to be in. It's an extremely difficult seat to be in. Unfortunately, I cannot help but think that the reason why it is so difficult is because of the very government that is now sitting in that seat. They have been in charge for 48 of the 64 years since 1956, and they are responsible largely for what it is. But that is now, in many respects, is water under the bridge because we have to go forward. I am very concerned, and I'm going to have to repeat this, that we are not moving in a serious way to find alternatives as foreign exchange owners. I will tell you something, and in fact, I was looking for a document, and I hope I found it, but I don't know how to put it up for you to see. Trinidad and Tobago has a very, very small, what I could call penetration index with tourism. In fact, when you talk about agriculture, tourism is just as bad. Tourism is about 4% of the GDP, and of countries that are important. When I'm going to look at the thing and just read it out for you. That they have this. There's an index that has been calculated by the IDB, and out of 160 something countries that they looked at, Trinidad, in terms of tourism, is 106 in terms of a country where tourism is important to it. And the kinds of countries, you know who's on the top of that list? Aruba, which is a Caribbean country. And very close to the top, in fact, second is Antigua and Barbuda, followed by the Bahamas, followed by St. Lucia, followed by Dominica, followed by Grenada, Barbados. They are all high on the list, and Trinidad and Tobago. So tourism, we are going to have to come a very, very long way to tourism, or we're going to have to present a product that is so completely different. And if indeed we want to go in that direction, we should do that. But if we start going in the tourism of sandals and the sea and sex and sand and all that, that is not going to get us anywhere, because other countries already dominating that market. We have to be very, very, we have to look at things like event tourism and so on. And we have to be looking at other ways of earning foreign exchange, even if we want to go in the tourism direction. We are way, way, way behind our Caribbean brothers and sisters. So I don't know that tourism is something that we want to try and, except if we are going to be doing something very, very, very different to give us a niche market that will distinguish us, that people will want to come here rather than go to Barbados, rather than go to somewhere. So even go here, even if they go to Barbados, they will also come here, but for a different reason. We cannot compete with them on that. They have an absolute advantage over us, and what economists call a comparative advantage over us. So we have to look at the realities when we're dealing with these things. There are many other things that. Yes, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to ask you, because where would you?
The stark realities is I don't know. And that is the blunt answer. And what you have to do, and what we have to do as a people, is to try to find ways of finding out how we can do it. I heard certain comments from so I hate it when governments in particular sit down and identify something that I should go and do. How do they know that? And if they're so good, why they don't go and do it themselves? So they are telling me to go into a particular thing. They are the worst people to tell me to go into anything. I prefer that we create an enabling environment, and that becomes very, very difficult there, because an enabling environment requires that you have money. And worse than that, you have to have money in the form of foreign exchange. We have very little of that, relatively speaking. So we are in a situation where we have missed the boat on encouraging diversification. But as I always say, we missed the best time, but the second best time is now. What we have to do is put on our thinking caps and start moving forward on this. But as I look at that budget and all the exercise, even when I look at the roadmap, I am seeing nothing that is telling me that we are going to find a way to earn the foreign exchange that will replace oil and gas. So you know what that means? Sooner or later, we are going to bounce up a problem, and it's directly to the IMF. We are going to go. Red talked about 1986. You know what happened in 1986? We ran out of foreign exchange, and we went straight to the IMF. We have a buffer now that is keeping us going, and they are probably playing for time, see how long they could use this buffer. Because while we don't add I'm telling you, you look from 2014 to now, there's a steady decline in the foreign exchange. You know what I mean? Sooner or later, if that trend continues, and it will continue, you're going to hit zero. You understand? You have to find something to earn you foreign exchange, because nothing in this country, the shirt on your back, the glasses on your eyes, the computer that you're looking into, nothing is available that does not have foreign input in it.
Thanks a lot for that. Ved, I know you have your list of ideas that you think that we should have put in place before some of what was read today. So take your time and tell us what that was.
Yeah, I would look at an austerity budget. That's one, and I'll describe that in a minute. But by and large, we need to diversify this economy. We cannot move away from agriculture. Whenever you diversify an economy, you ask what are the resources we have. We do have land, we do have good weather, we have good rainfall. We have people who are used to agriculture. In fact, we have some very, very bright people with very wonderful ideas. So agriculture has to be number one. And under the two slogans, one, eat what we grow, and secondly, grow what we eat. Grow what we eat provides us with tremendous opportunities, because many things we can grow here that we import. And therein lies the challenge for us, and I would call it an excitement, is that we need to grow new crops that we actually eat, that we import, that we can actually grow in the ground. What are some of those new crops? Many years ago, we never had cantaloupe. Now cantaloupe is very common. So we can grow a lot of things. We can grow tea here. We have coffee, we have cocoa. All those things should be brought up to speed. And if we do have surplus, we can export. But by and large, let us give agriculture number one priority. Secondly, we have to do agro-processing. We can plant all the tomatoes, but it's very seasonal, and then we throw it away. We can set up small plants to process these, let's say tomatoes as an example. We make tomatoes puree for all our the pizzas, and we can make juice. I would ensure that within 3 years we are self-sufficient in rice. At least we will have rice to eat. I would start back the sugarcane industry, and I will use gas to fire the furnace, gas, natural gas to fire they're doing that in Louisiana. Then you use the bagasse to make paper. You take all the waste paper and add it to that, and we can make some of the best paper in the world with bagasse. Then we spawn, with the same bagasse, we make animal feed to spawn a dairy industry. We can do a lot of things to be self-sufficient in milk. Everybody list why it cannot be done. I'm saying I don't want to hear that. I will call in the experts and tell me how to do it, right? So we are very, very backward, We always, the first thing we see a problem, we make out a list why it cannot be done. The other thing, recycling is a big industry. Do you know we are going to ship out all our steel? We can set up a plant. I'm working with a client now to get that plant going, and let us recycle the steel. Why are we shipping it out when we have the gas here to fire the furnace? We are shipping it out to China and re-importing rebars. Are we crazy? So what are the resources? The resources are just not land, but we have a lot of waste in Trinidad. Plastics, you can do a tremendous amount. Get the recycling going. Get the recycling. We can set up small plant. $5,000 can buy you a small plant to make ingots out of aluminum from the. Listen, there are too many things to be done. We can set up a furniture factory here for world-class furniture manufacturing. Why can't we bring some Indonesians? Why can't we bring some Malaysians and teach us how to make world-class furniture? We have the teak. We can grow mahogany. We can plant 1,000 acres in different high-value trees. There are too many exciting things for us to be glum. But we have to start with a smaller government. We have to cut their salary, cut their pay. We do not need all these ambassadors abroad. Bring them to parliament and let them account for what they do. We do not need all these people. So the government has two challenges. Reduce the size of government and create, through policies and direction, create job opportunities in that they can make things and grow things that you can drop on your feet. The service sector is just sucking this country dry. I hope I was within my 3 minutes.
You were a little bit over, but good.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gus left some
All right.
time on the clock. Ramona, take it from there, girl.
Yes, hi. Thanks a lot, Philip. Let me say I want to agree with Mr. Seereeram, and I am as optimistic as him. I thought that there should have been more focus on agriculture and tourism. And let me say with tourism, Trinidad and Tobago now, the government needs to redefine, refocus, and change the game plan going forward. There's a need for a cogent strategy involving all stakeholders, and I see that the first world countries have disaggregated into 3 phases. So they're saying that their tourism industry needs to survive, they need to revive it, and they need to and it needs to thrive. So first of all, we need to save businesses and jobs. We need to prioritize products and destinations, and I make reference to Tobago. That would be of interest. So we have to have a target market and ensure that these deliver value for money. I think the government should also implement the gradual lifting of restrictions and work with CARICOM to create a travel corridor, and then gradually resume the international flights with enhanced safety and hygiene protocols. And these are some of the measures that they can look at to restart tourism. With respect to agriculture, as Mr. Seereeram and Professor Watson said, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic should redefine how we eat and how we feed ourselves. We need to be self-sustainable when it comes to feeding ourselves. And we now have a unique opportunity to adopt a long-term measures to promote healthier diets. We need to encourage farmers to produce a wide range of food and strengthen collaboration among the public health, food, and agricultural sectors. And I think there's also a need for change because it is clear that unhealthy diets are one of the leading risk factors related to COVID-19 fatalities. And the COVID-19 virus affects people who are overweight, who are diabetic, who suffer from heart disease, and it's all linked to poor diets. Another area that should have been focused on, again, as I said earlier, as we started, health sector reform, and I went a little bit into that with respect to the legislation that govern the RHAs. So these are some areas. Unlike Mr. Seereeram said, I am very much in support of expanding the cocoa industry, the pepper, cultivating peppers and exporting. We have a huge market out there for exportation of pepper. When you look at tourism, as Professor Watson said, we need to have target audiences now. So we should look at medical tourism, we should look at sports tourism, we should look at cultural and culinary tourism. So these are some areas that we can focus and grab at the tourism market out there.
I like that. I like that very much. I wanted to ask you in the last minute and a half that you have, outside of
Yes.
that though, because of your experience in government, and a lot of the people looking on are going to feel that we didn't adequately answer the question about the fact that there's nothing in place to make sure that what we heard today, that is a budget, is actually carried out. It could have been just nothing.
We need a people's parliament.
Yeah. Dr. Bhoe Teware.
Yes, thank you. Well, I mean, I enjoyed listening to all the guys, but I would say that the first thing the Minister of Finance should have done, and I wrote about this some weeks ago, was to come to the Parliament with the honest truth on at least 2 things: the COVID expenditure and the extent of it, and secondly, the debt and debt servicing, not just to tell us 85% or 80%, they will bring it down to 65, but let us know what the actual debt is. The debt, the government debt, the contingent liabilities, all of those things, so we have an understanding, and therefore the debt servicing requirements. Secondly, I think the government should have, before the budget, presented a 3-year plan plus a fiscal plan for the 3 years, including a cut in subventions to state enterprises. I think if you had a 10% for the state enterprises that are subsidized, or maybe you could be a little more generous and do a 7% cut, I think that would send a signal. Each of those state enterprises would have to tighten up, and it would cut expenditure significantly. I would have had a discussion with all the multilaterals, World Bank, IDB, CAF, all these people, including IMF. Not that you're going get any advice to them, from them, but you engage them in the process of where you be headed as a country, how you're going to do it, and you are therefore in a position to treat them as stakeholders in the process later. I would have also done that with the rating agencies, and I would have done all of this before budget day. Then, because they had time, they had 2 months, then I would have the actual budget focus on the one issue that is the issue of survival for Trinidad and Tobago, which is non-energy exports and therefore the winning of foreign exchange from the production process. And together with that, I would have an internal production plan to generate foreign exchange savings. Very much they had agriculture as part of that, and that would be part, but other things we would do. And I would also have an enhancement of asset plan for jobs, and perhaps I would use this time, the next 30 months, the next 36 months when tourism will be low, to build up the tourism assets both in Trinidad and in Tobago, but large amounts of local labor. I would also link flood, water capture, agricultural production and irrigation, and I would put together the opportunity for creating jobs in the system, doing things that will make a difference to the production and productivity process. I would also have aligned with that a survival, recovery, and growth plan, understanding that we are dealing with COVID and it's in 2 phases. One, until we get a vaccine, pre-vaccine, and one, when we get a vaccine, when the world then begins to reorganize and reorient itself for a higher level of production and sustainability. I would also focus on building a new economy, and that new economy would have to be linked to climate change, responsiveness, sustainable development requirements, creativity needs in the world that we could produce, the digital economy, and artificial intelligence. So I would build a new economy based on those things. Now, I want to say that having said that, I don't want to criticize everything the government is doing. I think that ease of doing business is a good thing. Agriculture is a good thing. Manufacturing is a good thing. I would focus on the value chain and exports issue when related to manufacturing. I think the construction is good. I think the digitization is good. I think the privatization of the port is necessary. I think the liberalization of the fuel sector is also something positive. But I have some problems, which is that I don't know if they can implement any of these things given the capacity and given the configuration of the public service structure and culture. And secondly, I don't know the way this thing is so haphazard and without fiscal rules and without anything that are that can be seen as constraints, whether these things are going to happen according to due process or with corruption in them. I am worried about the big projects, the growing debt, the fact that we have nothing related to non-energy exports as a trust, and that we have no new foreign exchange revenue measures. I am skeptical about the numbers. I told you that the deficit and the revenue numbers especially. The 84,000 people who's supposed to get a tax relief, first of all, they have to have jobs. I don't think he was truthful to us in telling us the amount of unemployment in the country. And in fact, what that 250,000 people that he calculated has dwindled down to. I think that the issue of no fiscal boundaries or restraints or constraint, I already mentioned, and I'm worried about that. The water and electricity issue means that we're going to have increases in those in this difficult time, but we are not guaranteed of greater efficiency and effectiveness. The numbers for revenue and deficit are also mentioned, and the property tax. Now is a pretty bad time to put that tax on people. I want to agree, but I am especially concerned about the element of political interference in the administration of the property tax and the ability of people to appeal and have a fair, what can I say, hearing and a fair judicial process in the determination of what they are supposed to pay. Those are some of the things I would say as I close. I want to thank you for the opportunity for inviting me and giving me a chance to express my views. And I would like to say that I enjoyed the company I was in. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that, Dr. Teware. Let me also apologize for Senator Nakhid's abrupt exit, his departure. He has a family emergency. He WhatsApped me the details, but it's not in my place to share it. So I guess he will be sharing his own information. I don't know what's wrong with Dano Suku's connection. I don't know if she's back. Dano? We seem to have lost Dano along the way. But the panel information that was shared here tonight, and I mean it's a tip of an iceberg, but it shows that there's a lot to be done and a lot that should have been done in this budget. This was a critical budget. It is a budget that the government seemed to have been trying to avoid. That's why the election was called before time. And it demonstrated that they still don't have a plan or a clue. A lot of the people in the finance world and economists are sending me messages and saying that these numbers are just pie in the sky, that nothing here is based on anything in reality. This was all theater. And if the budget is theater, and I ask again, there's only one act of parliament that has to happen or the parliament will be dissolved, is the reading of the budget. And if there is nothing in our law and there are no systems and nothing that says that the budget has to be predicated on things that can be proven and assessed and measured, then what's the point of the whole thing? The people looking on are not stupid, they are informed, they're educated, and they are asking very good questions. I want to share just a couple of things that people have posted. Somebody said, screw the small man who could have afforded a good small foreign used car at a reasonable price. Add duties, tax and VAT plus drop the age of the imported car from 4 to 3 and then reduce the quota by 30%. And for good measure, implement this in 15 days. 15 days, not at the start of 2021, 15 days. What about cars already shipped? Everything else starts at January 1st, 2021. It's clear you have no idea what you're doing. It's also blatantly clear who you want to survive and who you want to forcefully close down. Force them to buy new cars at exorbitant prices, then face the bank with crazy interest rates. Now, this is what the people on the ground are seeing. Somebody said, imagine the guy at 59 and a half paying NIS his entire working life, expecting returns at 60. How can the minister literally move the goalposts? Changing the retirement age should not be legal for those already in the system. A lot of things going on here. People talking about the houses that have been bought and have paid stamp duty on. If you come to take a property tax, that is more than double taxation. All of these things. Are you going to refund the stamp duty that was paid at the time you purchased? Because these things have to be asked. I think all of us and a lot more people, and we have to use this forum to keep asking these questions. I would like to thank all of you who made yourselves available tonight to impart your wisdom and share your knowledge. The viewers enjoyed it immensely, and I look forward again in the future to chatting with each and every one of you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Everybody. And good evening to you.
Bye.